welcome to this very important conversation that I'm having with Dr. Mukesh Aghi, who is the President and CEO of USISPF, to understand the impact of a Trump 2.0 presidency on India, the India-US relationship 2.0, if one may say so, and the extent of the bonhomie that exists between the two leaders. That how will it shape the India-US relationship? Dr. Aghi, thank you so much for speaking to NDTV.
My pleasure.
So how do you see the results that have come? They shocked many, but were you anticipating them?
Well, we did anticipate the win, but this is a shocking victory. It's a landslide for Trump and the Republican Party. We are seeing the White House, the Senate gone. I'm waiting for the numbers on the House side, and all indication are it also could go in favor of the Republican Party. So it is a landslide for Trump.
So when was the last time there was a president who was so powerful that he had the electoral college vote, of course, which he became a president, but popular vote under his belt, Senate under his belt, Supreme Court under his belt, and possibly the Congress as well?
We call the winner of trifecta,
yeah.
All three, but more important is he won the popular vote.
Yeah.
Last time a Republican who won was in 2004. And for last 20 years, nobody has won like Trump has won as a Republican president. So that's a strong mandate has received from the people of the United States.
And that mandate is for some of the tough measures that he's spoken for, whether it is immigration, whether it is the economy, the cost of living, all of which has a direct bearing on the India-US relationship.
No, absolutely. I think immigration is a big issue, both legal and illegal. Economy is a big issue, especially job creation in the blue-collar environment itself. I mean, look at geopolitically, the world is more in turmoil, the war in Ukraine, the war in Middle East, the stress point with China. So I think all those issues have to be addressed.
Indeed. Specifically, if one were to speak, let's say, about the first issue, which is the illegal immigration point of view, there are tons of statistics that have come in, some even saying that 1 million deportation could cost $88 billion of taxpayer money, completely unacceptable to the people here as well. But it gives an indication of the direction of the policy, doesn't it? Talk to us about your expectation of what this can be, because it also mixes up the issue regarding legal immigration and legal migration. That's also very important for India, isn't it?
Well, you have 16 million illegal folks in the United States. Now, can you deport them all or within the next 12 months? The answer is no. It's a complex process, it's a legal process, and it's a costly process. But the message is we got to stop illegal immigration. And you have to understand, the third largest are Indians.
Yes.
And that has an impact on the legal immigration side also. So unless you stop the illegal, how do you fix the legal becomes a challenge.
So do you see, or do you anticipate some tough calls on H1B? Do you expect some tough measures that may impact Indian companies, and how do you see some of those responses that will have to come in from the Indian administration as well?
Well, you have to understand, US needs skilled workers. US need highly educated STEM workers also. And it's important that legal immigration continues so you can fulfill the need of American businesses itself. Yeah. So I think that we need to clean up the process itself so people don't take advantage of legal immigration also. So I think you will see a lot of effort from that perspective. Yes, initially there will be turmoil in that area, but it will settle down and benefit the legal immigrants.
H1B, if you would like to say something on that, because it impacts IT, it impacts Indian IT in a very major way. And any signaling, messaging from the Trump administration, the Indian side will also have to try and find out some way of trying to do, expectation management, both for America as well as for India.
Yes, I think H1B impacts because over 70% of the H1B workers come from India. But you have to understand that once you correct the problem, it will help the Indian companies quite a bit. So initially it's going to put a constraint, but as time goes by, it'll get better, and you get the right legal immigrants coming to India. So I think the impact will be there initially, but mid to long term, it's going to benefit the Indian companies.
What about the trade relationship? Should we be bracing now for some heavy tariffs, whether it's 20%, whether it's more, some specific sectors likely to be targeted? How do you see the trade relationship now changing under a Trump 2.0?
Well, I think 20% tariff is going to be bumpy, and that's going to impact from the export side. But I think you have to understand 60% of China will drive a lot of manufacturing out of China, and India could be a beneficiary from that perspective.
You see in America leading that transition from China to India in terms of manufacturing?
So I think the American companies will have to decide that, because they want to have access to the Chinese market, but at the same time not have manufacturing risks because of the stress point between US and China. So what they may end up doing is have manufacturing in China only for China only, and move for the rest of the world outside China. Some may come back to the US. The challenge we have is we don't have enough skilled workers to basically provide that manufacturing. So we will see that a lot of them moving to India, not just only because of manufacturing, but also access to Indian market itself. When you look at Apple as a company,
Yes.
they moved some manufacturing in India, but they also gained a lot of domestic market share.
Right.
Today, Apple revenue in India has crossed $5 billion itself.
Yes.
So I think companies are going to basically recalibrate their de-risking of supply chain and also access to markets also.
So that is Make in India and Make America Great Again coming together quite literally.
Absolutely.
So what about the other key issue in terms of the strategic alignment between India and US? A lot of that has happened in the last decade or so. Under the Trump administration, how do you see that, particularly regard to China and the other factor, Russia, both of which impact India, very, very significantly?
So I think the multiple factors. One is the stress point with China will get deeper and broader. You have to understand, China committed during Trump 1.0 $200 billion of procurement of US goods, and it did not honor that commitment. So Trump has basically strong memories about that. Second factor is...
So you say he's going to come down harsher on China on trade?
Absolutely, because China made a commitment, that commitment was not honored. So there's a trust deficit with China dramatically with Trump himself. Two is when you put 60% tariffs on Chinese goods, yes, you will have US consumer paying, but they will also move their purchase to other sources of procurement itself.
Yes.
But more important is China's ambition to be a dominant power in Asia Pacific, to be a global dominant power, is going to create a much more stress point. And that's where India becomes pivotal. Because I think India's relationship with China is not the best itself. China will never accept India as an equal partner. So it serves the interest of India and the United States to come back together. The more important thing is you have to understand the Ukraine war has shown that countries which have a large industrial base can sustain long-term war. And US industrial base has eroded because most of the manufacturing moved
shifted,
back.
yeah.
And so I think while you try to bring back some manufacturing, India becomes a potential industrial base for US companies and US manufacturing from that perspective. And when you look at the last trip of bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and Biden, a lot of stuff was moved to India from that perspective.
Any back of the envelope calculations that you have, sir, in terms of what is the upside that we are talking for the Indian economy? Any broad calculations that you think can be done in terms of when you're moving this manufacturing from China to India?
It is difficult because the timeline and the planning of the US companies, but all I can say is if you look at just from a services perspective,
Yes.
we have now 1,700 global capability centers.
Yeah.
They're doing massive research for US companies. In fact, you look at Qualcomm as an example, 50% of the IP now is being generated in India. So you look at Samsung, you look at others. Today, every chip design in the world happens in India itself.
Yes.
So from a global capability center, we see a massive momentum.
Yes.
You'll see the same momentum happening on the manufacturing side. We are seeing basically Lockheed, we're seeing Boeing, we're seeing Raytheon doing a lot of their manufacturing now more and more in India itself. So I think that process will continue. It takes time.
Yes.
It takes time. And what we are seeing is it is an incentive factor for US companies to leverage the India skill, to leverage the India market. So I believe the momentum will pick up now.
So does that mean that collaborations with regard to semiconductors, collaboration with regard to defense technology would probably now expedite further to include more realms of collaboration?
No, absolutely. I think we have to find a way out as to how do you not get penalized on 20% tariff coming from India into the US.
Yes.
Because what happens is you want to leverage a global supply chain. And basically, if you want to stay within the global supply chain, the 20% tariff has an impact. And my recommendation...
So what's the way to get around
So I think the best way to get around that is look at the Quad. One of the highlights of Trump administration was make Quad a state leader summit itself. And if you look at the Quad economies, the 4 countries, total economy is GDP is roughly at $35 trillion. And you have US, which has a trade agreement with Japan. US has a trade agreement with Australia. India has a trade agreement with Japan. India has some kind of trade agreement with Australia. So if we can somehow make Quad as an economic platform, it is a defense platform, make it as a technology platform, economic platform, and focus on making a free market within the 4 countries, I think that's the way to go forward.
So you're saying a potential FTA between these 4 countries could be a game changer?
Absolutely, because I think these countries are geopolitically aligned, so from a security perspective they're aligned, and basically India has a surplus skilled resources, a growing market. US need that surplus resources, need that market. So is with Japan itself, so is with Australia. So it is a win-win factor for everybody.
And finally, sir, then a couple of questions I want to ask around Russia and the entire aspect around India's deep economic relationship with Russia, particularly with regard to oil purchases. They came under the scanner during the Biden administration as well. How do you see that under a Trump administration, especially more that, given that Trump as a personality, as a business leader is more oriented towards a transaction give and take kind of an approach? How do you see that impacting India's existing relationship with Russia?
Well, I think you have to understand, one is India's dependence on Russian defense equipment is coming down. You look at last 10 years, it has come down, and procurement from the US has gone up and up. So that's one factor. 2 is the trade between India and the US is almost $200 billion. Whereas with Russia, it's minuscule in single-digit billions of dollars itself. Now, yes, India has been buying Russian energy at a discounted price because it has to serve the interests of its citizens.
Right.
It has an inflationary impact also.
Yes.
But you have to understand also, 50% of that oil, once refined in India, goes to Europe and the United States.
Yes.
So both US and Europe are beneficiary from that perspective also.
Yes.
So I think Trump is a businessman. He understands that. I mean, he may make some noise from that perspective, but in the long term, he sees a win-win. So I don't see much of a pressure point coming from that perspective.
And finally, sir, I have to ask you this question around the fact that Prime Minister Modi and President-elect Trump, they have a great rapport that is there, whether it is the Howdy Modi event or several others. Sometimes what thorny negotiations are not able to achieve, bonhomie and rapport between leaders is able to achieve. Where do you think this will probably come in handy, given that several negotiations may end up becoming fairly thorny?
Well, I think you have to understand geopolitical alignment is important. And I think India, US are aligned from security to technology to economic to people. And when you have road bumps from that perspective, the personal relationship matters.
Yeah.
And I think Prime Minister Modi was one of the first ones to tweet congratulating President-elect Trump. He was one of the first few leaders to have a conversation with him also. So I think the bonhomie really works much better when you're geopolitically aligned. And I think both countries are aligned from that perspective. So I think you will see a much better relationship in a positive manner between the 2 countries.
All right, Dr. Aghi, thank you so much for speaking to NDTV, taking out the time and decoding what I think is going to be the next phase of the India-US relationship.
Thank you very much. Pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.
Okay.